east. Good rock, turn right, contact world busiest control tower on 8.4.
Thank you. Highway on left base, runway 35 left, clear to land, yellow dot, yellow dot.
Like a boss.
Turn right, proceed straight ahead to parking. That's the Grand Forks.
Welcome to Grand Forks.
Grand Forks? I thought we were going for Oshkosh.
Oshkosh was canceled this year.
We'll have to bring Oshkosh to UND.
Sounds good to me.
I hear Oshkosh is here this year.
Yeah.
Great.
Hey, Charlie, decided to back up and go home.
Goodbye, Oshkosh at UND. Good to be home, UND.
All right. Thanks, Beth. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Linseth, Dean of the Order Guard School, and welcome to this Dean's Forum in early August. We've never had one in early August, but welcome everybody to the forum. We've had a busy summer, as you saw on the world's busiest tower there. We definitely have had the most takeoffs and landings in all of the country, quite a few days this summer. And just to let you know, we did fly over 10,000 hours in July. So we've got things ramped up here well for the summertime, and looking forward to all the students returning in the fall semester for sure. As we look forward to the semester, it's definitely going to be different though. And my main message as I welcome you all to this forum, and I will be turning it over to our experts in the Order Guard School, is that we all are in this together. And that means we all have to work together to make sure we're safe here at the Order Guard School and the entire University of North Dakota and the Grand Forks community. And that doesn't mean just practicing COVID best practices Monday through Friday here at the university, but it's a 24/7 task that we all have to be involved in all weekend, all day long, and practicing the social distancing, wearing a mask, and all the stuff that you're gonna get briefed on, because we all have to ensure the safety of our entire operation. And I ask you for your support in that, and I know you will. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Beth Bierke, who will give some overview, and then we'll also hear from Dr. Mullendor, the chair of the Atmospheric Science Department, along with Dr. Van Huysen from the Aviation Department, and Mr. Schultz and Mr. Ressler from the Airport Operations. So Beth, take it away.
All right, thanks, Paul. And welcome, everyone. When I look back, I believe our last Dean's Forum was at the end of April, I think April 29th. And again, I think we have hopefully a lot more answers than questions this time as we prepare looking towards the fall semester. But definitely a lot has happened since late April. You look, May 26th, we were given approval to start flight training again out at the airport. And I know I myself amazed and just very proud to see all that has been accomplished safely out at Flight Operations. And I know Dick Schultz is going to give us an update on that. But again, everyone's following the safety protocols. We're doing things safe. And that's great to see. We're also wrapping up our summer session this week as the final week of the summer session, and happy to say that our student enrollments and keeping you all on track with your academic plans. We're just as busy this summer with classes as we were last summer, even though this summer they happened to be all online. So that was great to see. Also looking forward towards the fall. Our faculty have been working tirelessly all summer long, preparing for the fall semester and what that's going to look like. We're going to share some of the specifics with you for the Aerospace College today, and hearing more specifically from Atmospheric Science and the Aviation departments. Also going to update on Flight Operations, and we do want to make sure to leave time for questions and answers that you may have at the end. We are using the Zoom webinar, and we have over 100 viewers here live, so we do ask on Zoom, you do have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free as we're presenting, if you have questions that come to mind, you can always type in those questions. We've also opened it up so that you can see the other questions that are being asked. So if you have the same question, hit on the thumbs up to kind of upvote it to the top of the list. And as we wrap up our presentation and start taking questions, we'll try to address those questions that we know more of you have questions about to get those answers out to you. So real quick, kind of an overview. Like I said, a lot of preparation has been going in both from the faculty and the teaching side as well as from the university side. Campus looks a bit different than it did mid-March when most of you left for the spring semester. You should have received an email earlier this week or late last week talking about the Healthy Hawks COVID-19 Smart Restart information. This is actual training that the university has put together to inform you and kind of get you up to speed on what you can expect for the fall semester. We do need you to watch this. It's about a 40-minute video. Again, a lot of great information in there. We'll answer a lot of those questions you have over the broad UND topics on what's been happening over these summer months to prepare for the fall. Talks about classroom protocol, has information about housing, dining, all that is in there. And of course, when you complete it, you will get a nice completion certificate. So please take the 40 minutes, watch that video. It'll provide a lot of good overview and insight for you. But like I mentioned, a lot has been happening on ways in which our facilities, a lot of new signage has been put up, a lot of new figuring out what's the best way to socially distance, to move traffic in and out of the buildings. This is kind of a really confusing schematic, reminds me maybe of a complex electrical system that all the aviation students might be familiar with. But this is actually Odegaard Hall, and each of the buildings on campus and each of the floors on campus have these schematics detailing out the flow of people as well as signage that has been placed on doors for entering and exiting. In the classroom spaces, which seats can be occupied safely to maintain that social distancing. You can see each of the buildings are going to have specific doors to enter and exit. For Odegaard Hall, you guys are all familiar with the link between Odegaard and Stribel. That's actually where you'll enter the building. As you enter, then you'll flow through the building and exit on the more northern east and west doors. So again, as you come back to campus, we need to be cognizant of our surroundings, you know, and follow the signage to be able to keep our physical distancing. In the classroom spaces, again, a lot of work has gone into preparing these spaces to allow for students to be separated. That minimum, they actually use 7 feet, not 6 feet within the classroom spaces. Also the areas where the faculty members will be standing, the podium areas to teach from. There's markings on the floor there to make sure that we keep our distance. There's been plexiglass screens have been set up between the podiums and the students. We have been testing out for sound to make sure that you can still hear the faculty just fine. Most of us have loud teaching voices, so that probably isn't going to be a big issue. You can also see a lot of technology upgrades in the classrooms themselves. We'll talk about, and the faculty or the chairs will get into more details on how their faculty are preparing, but there's different methods and modes that are going to be employed. But what's important for us to have all of our classroom technology, all of our computers set up with cameras and microphones so that we can not only teach live in person, it can also be broadcast live online as well. There's also new technologies that I think Dr. Mullender has the most experience in, called a Wacom tablet, where you can actually kind of like a whiteboard that is through technology. And those have been installed in most of our classroom spaces as well. So a lot of changes, but we are definitely prepared to start the fall semester safely at UND. One of the things you may have noticed as you've been looking at your class schedule and Campus Connection, there has been some changes over the last few weeks, detailing out kind of the mode of instruction. There's really kind of, right now, and again, the name of the game is flexibility, but right now there's kind of 3 different modes that have been identified. In our college, we do have some courses that we are able to complete 100% in person, even with those physical distancing parameters in place. However, that means that oftentimes the rooms that you had originally signed up for may have moved around the complex, or in some cases, we have a couple of large atmospheric science classes that have actually moved all the way over to the Chester Fritz Auditorium to allow for that spacing. We've also identified some space in the complex that isn't typically used as classroom space, but because of their size, we wanted to utilize those in the fall. So you may see Robin 404 showing up on your schedule. That's just in the 4th floor of Robin Hall. That's a picture of it to the right. I actually think this is probably one of our best classroom spaces for the fall semester. Each student will have an individual little table that they can work at that allows for that distancing. We've also been using the atmospherium a lot more than we have in previous semesters because that is a larger auditorium style that allows for more seating. You saw the classroom computers. The technology is set up for what's called a hybrid or high flex class, where some students may be live in class one day of the week, and the others will be zooming in live during class to still be able to interact with their faculty members. And then the next day it may flop who's in class and who's watching live. So a lot of spaces, because unfortunately our classrooms, the sizes of the way they were, if they normally sat 35 students during, with the COVID separation, maybe they only seat 10 or 11 students for the fall semester. There are, of course, fully online courses that either have been added to the schedule, and we'll let the chairs talk about that, or have been changed in the schedule. And this could have been because, you know, a faculty member is more high risk and needed that kind of an accommodation, or it could just be the size of the class, the faculty member prepared to teach that online versus the hybrid high flex. So you might see some of those changes. Your scheduling changes should start to slow down. But again, it is something you probably want to take a look at periodically up until that first day of class. Also, another change is going to be a lot of the appointments. I know we pride ourselves in having a great open door policy throughout the college. Unfortunately, in the fall semester, this might be a little bit different in some of our areas, most notably in the Dean's Office area where our Aerospace Student Services is located, as well as our Fiscal Affairs and Financial Aid representatives. So we're going to be utilizing more of the virtual appointments for these areas. Again, we still want to meet with all of you. We still want to do the one-on-one. And we're going to be setting up these appointments through what's called Starfish. To get to Starfish, if you're not aware, if you go on the main UND homepage, there's a little button that says login. You click on that and you get all sorts of options to log in, to Blackboard, to Campus Connection. Starfish is one of those. So you click on that, you log in with your username, first name, last name, password, and it'll bring you into your Success Center, a lot of information. Your advisor will show up on there, your schedule. And then they have an area called Other Services. So we have our Aerospace Services section in there, and that's where you're going to find information on our professional advisors. Elaine, who works with Financial Aid, will be adding our Fiscal Affairs, so your flight account. Questions will be added to there, as well as some of the leadership within the academic departments. And so you can click on those individuals and actually set up virtual appointments with them. I know I can personally say I've worked with quite a few of my advisees over the spring semester, and it was actually very conducive to use Zoom for these advising appointments, because you can share your screens back and forth and sort of have that same connection you may have in person. And Dick Schultz is going to talk a little bit about flight outs, but we're also looking to utilize the scheduling function in Starfish to assist with sort of the I don't want to say chaos, but again, there's a lot of people that get enrolled at the airport the first week of classes. And so this is a good way to spread out those numbers out at flight operations as well. So again, Starfish is where you're going to want to look to make a lot of these appointments with different individuals throughout the college and throughout the university. By and large, most of the university offices now function on Starfish very well. Also, for more information, just want to highlight the university, actually led by President Armacrost, who just recently took the helm on June 1st, is going to be doing 2 Zoom sessions for students and parents as well, and taking questions and answers. You can find these if you just go on the UND website and search out Zoom info sessions. It's going to pop up right away. But you see they're going to be next week, August 12th. That's a Wednesday evening, and then Tuesday, August 18th. So again, if you have more of those questions, you've taken the training from the university, tune into those to get more of a higher level university look at things. Tonight, we're going to focus solely on the Aerospace College. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Gretchen Mullendor, our new chair of Atmospheric Sciences. Gretchen.
Thanks, Beth. So yeah, I don't have any slides. There's just this title slide for us. You can see here we are in the Leon Osborne Weather Center, testing out some new technology, myself and some of the faculty. And I actually believe several of our faculty are online listening in, and just a huge thank you to everyone for all the hard work they're putting in to get us ready to go safely back to school this fall. So Beth mentioned that there's room changes happening to better accommodate our classes. I do want to give everyone a heads up for that. The Atmospheric Sciences classes, those are still working through the system. So be on the lookout for room changes to continue to pop up. So we'll try to have those in the next week, but they aren't all finalized yet. So just be on the lookout for that. So what's going on in Atmospheric Sciences? So also, as Beth mentioned, that we have 2 of our biggest lectures have moved over to Chester Fritz. So that's Introduction to Meteorology at Sci 110 and Aviation Weather at Sci 231 will both be in the Chester Fritz. I do believe those room changes are already in. For our lab sections for the underclassmen, so we are still working through the details, but we are planning to have everyone in person for our labs. We're going to do that by splitting into 2 classrooms during lab periods. So that's for, again, Introduction to Meteorology at Sci 110 lab, and then also for Introduction to Synoptic Meteorology, which is the at Sci 210 lab. So and you'll be able to find out more information on those when you start classes, but everybody will be able to come, and then we'll split into 2 classrooms for those. So we will have a few classes that will be the hybrid because we weren't able to find a room big enough for them. Particularly, again, the lecture portion of Introduction to Synoptic Meteorology 210 and Severe and Hazardous Weather 220, those look to be that they're going to be half in person, half at home remotely, but that means everybody gets to be in person for those classes at least 50% of the time. So that's great. And we will be using all that new technology so the folks at home can see, tune in live for lectures. Although I know the faculty are still working through the details. And on August 10th, which I don't think was mentioned yet, there will be all the Blackboard sites for all the classes will have a statement up that it may not be all the details on the class, but there'll at least be a statement with the basics on how that particular class will be held. And you can follow up with the individual professors more details on that. So all of our upper division and graduate classes look to be, we found rooms that they can be 100% in person. But most of the faculty are still planning to teach them using the new technology such that if students have to be at home for any reason, because they may need to be away from campus that day for health reasons, we want everybody to stay safe, you will still be able to participate in classes those days. So even though most of our classes can fit in our new classrooms that we found, we will still be using hybrid technologies. I did want to mention the computer labs. Computer work's a big part for upper division in atmospheric sciences. For our numerical methods class. That will be 50% time in the lab, 50% at home for the lab portion of that class. And the access to our computer labs, there will be access, but it'll be extremely limited. So that means a lot of the computer work for various classes and for capstone projects will have to happen remotely. But I want to let everyone know that the department will be working really closely with all the students that need help getting connected remotely, just like we did in the spring, to make that happen, along with the computer support services for aerospace. So a lot of work's going into making sure that people can do all their work remote if necessary. So just reach out if you have questions. And I think that's all the updates from atmospheric science.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen. My name is Brett Venheisen. I'm the chair of the aviation department, and I've got some updates for you from aviation, and I'll talk a little bit about some of our specific programs. But before we do that, we'll talk about some more general updates. Remote instruction went smoothly for the rest of the spring and over the summer. We've had a really great experience with being able to instruct remotely, and it's gone really well. We've gotten good feedback from students that it's worked pretty well on your end as well. But we are excited to be back with in-person activity this fall. Our facilities and classes will look and operate differently as we return to a new normal. Classrooms are different. The biggest thing you'll notice is that there's a significantly reduced occupancy, as Beth mentioned. So masks will be required in all indoor spaces, and that will include classrooms and offices and hallways. In the classrooms themselves, many tables have been removed, many desks have been removed. That allows us to get more seats and chairs in the classrooms. For example, we had some classrooms that normally seated 72 that were down to like 12 if we left the tables in there. But by removing the tables and just putting seats, we were able to get it back up to 24 or 26, something like that. We did have some student focus groups earlier this semester or this summer, and that led us to conclude that we needed to order some sort of devices to put on the chairs so that you could more readily take notes, so that you could have your computer or a notepad or whatever you needed there. So those are going to be installed soon. They're on the way. The space it's coming together. It'll look different, but it is definitely coming together. We have made an effort to hold most of our Part 141 flight courses in Robin 404 so that we can put as many people in those spaces as possible. And in most cases, we are going to be pretty full in that classroom with those students. Next slide. Teaching will be different for the faculty members. Professors will be limited to a very distanced space at the front of the room. So most of us move around quite a bit when we teach, and that won't be happening. They'll be staying in the area that's taped off. There are shields that will be placed around the computer stations and such. In most classes, there'll only be a portion of registered students that will be in class on any given day. The other students will attend class at the same time, but via Zoom. In some cases, we've made arrangements for a faculty member to operate 2 classrooms at once. And so they will lecture in one classroom and students will observe in both classrooms, and the class will be split between those 2. So the faculty member can move between spaces after the lecture portion is complete. So a lot of different variety with how faculty are choosing to handle their classes. They've really spent a lot of time working hard, figuring out the best situation for those classes, and I really appreciate the work of all of our faculty in figuring that out. As Beth showed you in her pictures, we've added a lot of technology, webcams, mics, the Wacom tablets, and we're all learning how to use all of that new technology. Next slide, please. Flexibility will be key. Our faculty are all prepared, if required to do so, for us to go remote for a period of time. We've got that down to a science now. We've had a lot more time to get ready for it this time around. So we're prepared for that. Faculty have also prepared to help their colleagues if someone becomes ill or needs to quarantine. So they're working out plans to have their colleagues fill in as needed and help them out so that we can make sure that classes continue to operate normally. Everyone needs to be patient and just trust that we'll do our best to provide the great education for our students that we always have. It's just going to look a little differently this semester. Let's talk about some of our programs and get into a few more specifics. So the UAS program, we have some updates from UAS that Paul Snyder shared with me to share with you. Thank you, Paul. Aviation 126, the UAS simulation has been upgraded to offer the UAS training online, so that's big news for us. Another note is that the UND UAS policy now allows students to concurrently take a UAS flight lab and either a fixed wing or helicopter flight lab at the same time. So that will certainly improve that process for you as well. UAS Flight Ops has been very busy during this time flying. They've got COVID procedures in place, and they got back to operating on the same schedule that Flight Ops did at the airport. So that has gone well. Next slide. UAS program is sending out a letter to the students to discuss the COVID procedures for academic classes. So that will be happening. We've got a lot of new equipment that's come on scene. You saw some pictures on the last slide that showed some of that equipment. There will be Scan Eagle UAS flying every semester. So that's great news and big news for the UAS program. And then there are a couple of emails here that you might want to take note of. Our Assistant Chief UAS Pilot, James Moe, returning students should contact him to finish up any prereq training prior to school starting. And if you have any basic general questions on the UAS program, please contact Paul Snyder. He's the Assistant Chair for UAS, and his email there is as well. Next slide. Air traffic management updates. Paul Drexel provided me some updates to share with you here. Thank you, Paul, for doing that. His goal has been to keep ATC simulation labs a safe zone for training our students. So they've worked hard to create and maintain safe zones for training. They're going to continue to mitigate the ability to transfer coronavirus. They have procedures that are required for all students and employees who are going to use the ATC simulators. And those procedures are going to be outlined in all of the course syllabi. So see your course syllabus for specific details on how the ATM classes will operate. All students should have received an email by now from course faculty that contain those details in the procedures document. So please contact the faculty member teaching the ATM course if you have questions about any specific ATM course. Next slide. You will need to purchase some of your own equipment for the ATM labs. The main thing there is a top portion of your ATC communication headset. There was a document that was emailed to everybody at your UND email account with details about the equipment that you need to purchase. These items will not be available through the UND entities on campus. You need to purchase them on your own, and you'll need to bring them to class with you no later than August 31st. So you'll need to get those ordered. You'll also need a touchscreen stylus with a soft end. Any capacitive touch stylus should work just fine. We're going to use those in our simulators as well. Next slide. All simulators will be thoroughly disinfected at the end of every class and at the end of every day. Each class will be given materials and instructions on how to sanitize their stations prior to simulation runs. Guests, unfortunately, and non-enrolled students will not be allowed to observe for the time being. And Friday afternoon makeup labs are suspended until further notice. We have to do that in order to get capacity where we need to be. Next slide. Physiology provided some updates. Thanks, Tom Zedlick, for that. All of the academics for the physiology course will be online. There'll be weekly live Zoom reviews and weekly labs. The chamber labs are going to be smaller groups than normal. That will allow some extra space for makeup labs from previous semesters. We have students from spring and summer who want to make up those labs. There are going to be some new and improved spatial disorientation scenarios that you'll be excited to be able to participate in. There's a new lithium fire guard box that they'll be using for some classroom demonstrations this semester. Of course, like all the labs, there's some new sanitation procedures in place for labs and for oxygen equipment, both to make sure that everything is clean and ready for you to use. Remember to arrive early for your lab so that you can complete the COVID checklist and be ready to go at start time. Next slide, and I'll be handing it over to Lewis Archer now, the Assistant Chair of Flight Academics, to update you on our flight courses. Lewis.
Thank you, Professor Van Huysen. Again, my name is Lewis Archer. I'm the Assistant Chair of Flight Academics. A couple of updates to share with you on how we intend to conduct our Part 141 ground schools this semester. First of all, a couple of registration updates. If you are currently signed up for a flight course in Ames and you have a status of added in Ames, you will receive authorization to register in Campus Connection within the coming days. That's regardless of your flight progress at this time. If you have a status of added in Ames and are signed up in Ames, you will receive that authorization shortly. Keep in mind, this is not an automated process. So there may be a short delay as we get our staff back up to speed and issue those Campus Connection authorizations. Once you do receive that campus connection authorization, it is critical that you utilize that as quickly as possible. So campus connection serves as the official registration record at UND. You are technically not permitted to attend class unless you are registered in campus connection. So once you receive that authorization, and you will be notified of that via email, please go ahead and use that right away. Some of you have been watching the capacity in campus connection for our flight courses. This is a reminder that the capacity listed in campus connection is not necessarily a reliable indicator of the true capacity in the course. We manage our flight course capacity through AIMS. There may appear to be space in a flight course in campus connection. Oftentimes that is because a student may not have taken that campus connection step just yet. So please monitor AIMS for the true indicator of capacity in the course. One other reminder there. So this was something that we announced a couple months ago now in a previous Dean's Forum. You will not be held to prerequisites this fall. So there is no need to be finished with your prerequisite flight course to remain enrolled in the subsequent ground school in the fall. But I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are intending to hold prerequisites as normal in spring of 2021, assuming we don't have any other issues that are unexpected. So if you are signed up in AIMS and registered in Campus Connection, you will not be removed from that course in the fall. As far as the delivery of our flight courses, we will be providing our flight courses on campus in person. Our flight courses have been assigned to some of the larger spaces on campus to accommodate every student in the classroom. However, we will have technology in each of those classrooms that allows us the ability to live stream the class if necessary. So for example, if a student had a need to connect remotely, perhaps because they were under quarantine or close contact or whatever it might be, we will have that capability. That's what's often referred to as the high flex model. So that does exist for us, but the primary method of instruction for our flight courses will be in person on campus. Attendance is still mandatory per our Part 141 TCO. So we do expect that students will attend every class. Again, that remote connection is available when necessary. We hope to reserve that for students that truly need to connect remotely. If you have other reasons why you might need to connect remotely, please speak with the academic instructor for that ground school. As far as makeup sessions for our flight courses, again, all academic content has to be covered with each student. So if you were to miss a class, the makeup procedure for the fall would be to view the recording of that particular class. We will not be requiring you to meet with your flight instructor to make up a missed class session. You will need to review the missed recording to maintain attendance. Please make sure that we are not abusing that. So again, just like always, absences from a flight course ground school needs to be for a valid reason. Things like a scheduled flight or briefing or whatever it might be that overlaps ground school, those are not acceptable reasons to miss ground school. So please make sure there is a valid reason for an absence. As far as our flight points go in the fall, we will be only offering 4 flight points. This is the same as what we did this summer. So the 4 flight points will be gained from stage check performance, first attempt stage check performance. There will be no flight gate that we will be enforcing this fall. And then the last item is a quick note about proficiency. So this semester is obviously very different in the fall, where many students are not going to be complete with the prerequisite flight training. But what's important to understand here is that there can be significant problems when there is a large gap between flight training and ground school. So if you begin the ground school in the fall, and as we approach the last data drop, which is November 13th, If you have made very little progress in terms of flight training in that particular course, it would be highly advisable to consider dropping the course and taking the ground school in the subsequent semester to ensure that you are proficient and well prepared for the respective stage checks. And with that, I'll hand it over to our flight operations team.
You'd think I would learn after all the Zooms I've been in that I would learn to unmute. My apologies. Anyways, on to the good stuff, the airport. Just kidding to the rest of the departments. But anyways, I wish you could hear what I can hear out my window. We have many airplanes and helicopters out running on the ramp right now. So it's been a interesting time for us out here. We've been in operation now we're on our 11th week, and things have been going really well. Could you go to the next slide? I'm curious what you got. Go to the next one. So one thing I want to talk about is our mitigation and protocol. We work very hard. We work with an infectious disease doctor. We work with the university. We work with a lot of people to develop our procedures that we have in place. And it's been working well. You know, the concern was initially, will the students accept it? Will the instructors accept it? I mean, the mask aspect here. I got a mask sitting on my desk. You know, are people going to like them when in the airplane and so forth? And to be honest, it was a couple weeks of adjustment, and now it's just become a normal practice, and the instructors say they don't even realize they're wearing it anymore, and the students are used to it in that regard. So it's just become a normal part of their day, you know, in that regard. So overall, that's gone well. Like I said, we've been in our operations now for 11 weeks. We flew 10,099 hours in July, which is the second highest hours we've ever flown in July. So we're basically back to full operations at the airport. We got our full aircraft fleet is back on the schedule. We've got 200 CFIs now back on the schedule. Hopefully I'm not speaking wrong. Jeremy can correct me in a little bit if I'm wrong, but I think we invited our very last students back just the other day that were interested in training with us yet this summer. So while it wasn't perfect for everybody, I hope everybody had patience with us and understand what we did and why we did it. We had to come in with a staged approach. We were being watched very closely by the university, and we wanted to make sure we did it right. And we are doing it right. It's going very, very well. I have daily meetings with the university and with the pandemic committee. Brian Willis is part of that committee as well, from our director of safety, to stay on top of that, which reminds me to remind everybody, this is a fluid situation. It can change daily. So what we talk about today may be different in 2 or 3 days or 2 weeks. We don't know. So it's very important that you pay attention and watch for updates and all those types of things. But for the most part, our students, I think, have done an awesome job of following our guidance. Brian, our director of safety, does a lot of emails to them, reminding them. And, you know, probably the biggest danger we've advised our students in, it's the social distancing or physical distancing, you know, outside of the airport. You know, outside of the airport or inside the airport, we got lots of protocol, the hand sanitizer, the cleaning of the aircraft, the distance and all that. But what we've run into, most of our situations we haven't dealt with, deal with situations the students have been involved with outside of the airport. You know, so again, that's something we're going to constantly preach. We're going to constantly remind everybody that, while sure, it's fun to be at college and there might be a party where there's going to be 30 or 40 people, you know, as an aviation student, we strongly advise you stay away from those types of scenarios, because you're putting your instructor at risk. And if your instructor becomes taken out of the game, then there's 4 or 5 other students that are infected. You know, there's just a constant effect, chain effect that it can have and so forth. But, you know, for the most part, we're very proud of our students because they understand that, you know, being from aviation, understanding the safety background and so forth. I think they've done a great job and they're making good choices. So far, so good. So next slide. One thing that's going to be a little different, Beth kind of touched on it, but those of you that have been here the first day of school, you know, that Monday, you're used to that line. You show up at the airport and you see a line coming out the door, down the parking lot. When you do get in the building, there's a line out of the bookstore, a line from records, and there's all this interaction because everybody tries to come to the airport the first day. I don't have all the specific procedures for you yet, but keep an eye on the website that UND has, and we're also going to send you some emails on this information. But we're going to take advantage of that Starfish program, and we're currently working on that right now. So like when you have to go to get your ramp badge or TSA badge, you're going to have to schedule an appointment. If you're going to go for enrollment procedures, you're going to have to schedule that. And the whole point of it is we just can't everybody showing up here on that Monday and trying to come out here and trying to get on the flight line. So it's going to be by appointment only. You're going to see that coming out. It's going to cause us to get a little bit of a slow start, but we're okay with that because it's for the safety of you and the employees that are out here. So keep an eye out for all that and so forth. So, okay. One thing too that we're really trying to stress to everybody, and for the most part, I think most students do this, you know, an iPad or iPad mini really is the best device for you to have, you know, if you're an aviation student, because you use it a lot in the airplane, especially when you get into your instrument courses in that regards. But the one thing we're really pushing now is that publications application, because it's actually the cheaper way to go to get your publications. You still can get paper copies, but our TCOs were just or a couple of them were just rewritten, and they're written to be on those type of devices, and they have color in them and so forth. So we really strongly suggest that you have an Apple or Android device that can download that application and so forth. So go ahead, next slide. The other thing is a shuttle. We are still running 2 shuttles, but we are limited by the university through transportation. They're only allowing 4 students per shuttle. So yes, that is causing some concerns. I've gotten several emails from parents asking about that. If you have a car and if your schedule is tight, it might be advisable that you do have access to a car depending upon your schedule, or work with somebody, you know, to use, you know, share a car with somebody else or whatever. But just to warn you, you could show up to go out to the airport and the bus could be full or the van could be full. So that's something we're going to monitor real closely. We're working with transportation. We're looking at other options. We did try to get a bigger vehicle, but they don't have the trained people to drive a bigger vehicle. So those are just some of the things we're working on in that regard. So we are trying to make that better. So, next slide. Okay, now it's up to Jeremy, can update you on more specifics to do with the airport.
All right, good evening, everyone. Jeremy Racelo, Chief Flight Instructor for the airplane side. Next slide, please. So I want to start off by talking about the flight schedule. We all know the flight schedule is busy. We all know that we had a CFI shortage and a lot of students in the program. The flight schedule is still very busy, mainly because of the March shutdown. So we have a lot of flight training that was supposed to happen in March, April, and May to catch up right now. That's what we've been focusing on this summer. When you invite over 900 students back to the flight line, things get very, very busy. And as Dick said, we did over 10,000 hours in July, which is awesome. It's tremendous. We're expecting a busy August just to keep things moving forward. So the flight schedule is still very much busy. So next slide, please. The students that have not been invited back to training. So Dick is correct. We have invited all of the students back to flight training, but there are some students out there that want to be back or they didn't fill out the survey back in May. All students are welcome back, obviously, when the fall semester begins. There's no approval process. There's no official invite needed. Once the fall semester is up and running, all students are approved to be on the flight line. And I'm going to second to what everyone's been talking about, the special COVID rules that we have in play right now. There may become a time soon, if not now, where the rules at flight ops is going to be stricter than the academic classroom. And the primary reason for that is that the flight instructor and student are sitting shoulder to shoulder. They're sitting within 6 feet of each other for a long period of time. So the rules are going to be stricter. And that's something just to accept and get used to in order for us to stay open as a flight operation. To continue operating with flight training requires us to operate with these strict rules. Next slide, please. As far as flight instructor staffing is concerned, it is improving. So yes, the flight schedule is busy, but the staffing is improving. So we will begin the fall semester with over 230 flight instructors on staff. We recently just hired 38. They're going to start training on August 10th. We had 16 start with us in July. So we've added 50 plus CFIs back to the flight schedule. The challenge is still going to be the advanced courses. So Aviation 325 is still going to be a little tight with the MEIs. The number of MEIs on staff is improving. That is getting better. But the main course that is affected is Aviation 414, our initial CFI course. There's specific FAA experience requirements to teach that course. Now we're gradually adding more CFIs to that because of the industry slowdown, but it's not perfect. It's still going to be a pretty tight schedule when it comes to Aviation 414. Next slide, please. Some details as to what's going on. So the CFIs will be assigned to the flight labs days before the semester begins. I know some students are already contacting us, very motivated, wanting to be contacting their flight instructor that they're scheduled with this fall. That's great, that's awesome, but we're not gonna do that until just days before the fall semester begins. You should get an automated email sent to you with that flight instructor assignment. It will be listed in AIMS also. There's one question that's posted right now regarding flight lab registration. When can you register for a flight lab? And that you do have to be done with your previous course. As long as you are registered in Campus Connection and your flight training is done in your previous course, then you can go into AIMS web and register for your flight lab. The last statement there, this is going to be a recovery semester. We're going to have students that are ready to go with their new course on day one. We're going to have students that still have weeks of flight training in the previous course. It's going to be all over the spectrum. So CFI assignments are going to be going on throughout the entire semester as students finish up their flight training. Next slide, please. We are still going to have shared flight labs. So we use the flight courses 112, 414, and 415 have had shared flight labs for a few years. It has worked out quite well to this point, and we're going to stay with it for now. If we need to split up the flight labs, or if the CFI availability allows us to, we will. But the bonus to the 414 and 415 flight labs being paired up is that the students get a cost savings by grouping together on those ground briefings. The 112 students, which is the abbreviated private pilot curriculum for students that are already licensed, it works well to pair up those students also because it's just a few weeks for them to complete that training. But again, we will split up these labs if need be, if the staffing and schedule allows. Next slide, please. Group briefings this fall, so a couple miscellaneous statements here. So we are allowing CFIs to do group briefings, and we had quite a few of a lot of this practice going on in previous years. But I want to make sure that students understand they're not forced to do this. A group briefing is an opportunity to reduce expense, share that responsibility with other students. Our requirement for this is that all students in that group must be okay with it, and all students must be assigned to that individual flight instructor. And if so, then they can do a group briefing. Observation flights for now are going to continue to not be allowed, where one student sits in the back seat while another one is flying. And we're also not allowing CFI coverage. So the ratio of student to CFI is going down, so that's good. But we are not allowing CFI coverage until further notice. These are all COVID mitigation to prevent any type of spread. So with that, I think we're on to the Q&A.
So thanks. So we did cover a lot of material in the last 45 minutes, and I'm sure you still have some questions. Some of you have already taken advantage of the Q&A button to submit questions. Remember, we do have them so you can view them. And so if you do want to upvote them, that does help us kind of sort through the questions to get answered. But I think I'll take the first question, and I'm going to direct it towards Dick Schultz. So Mr. Schultz, have there been any COVID cases on the flight line, and how have they been dealt with?
Okay, I knew that question was coming. So the answer to that question is yes and no. How I want to clarify that is, have we had a student that's been positive? Yes, it's somebody who was contracted it from outside at some event, and they've advised us and made us aware that they became positive. And the good news is, as soon as these students, they are finding this out, they're contacting us, and then they are going into quarantine. And then immediately we look at, well, who was their CFI? When did they last fly? We go through it on an individual basis to see if there's any close contacts that are defined off that. And if there is, they are put on quarantine. So we have gone through that with a few of them. But the good news is there's been no COVID transfer due to anything related at flight operations. We cannot trace anything back that somebody contracted it here because of something they were doing here. It's because somebody who has contracted it has brought it in from the outside. So Haven't been very many of those cases. We do keep an active file of that. Brian Willis watches that. He's kind of basically our contact tracer, and we watch all those students individually. And we also now have testing weekly provided by the university. So any students can go get tested at no charge if they want. Our instructors are encouraged to go do it as well in that regards. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dick. I will stick with you for this next one too. Very similar vein. Under what questions will flight under what circumstances will flight operations close?
I wish I had that answer. You know, I think our protocol and our mitigation have proven itself. We're doing a really good situation. However, if we did started to see cases that were occurring because of something with our mitigation or protocol, we definitely would stop our training and reevaluate and take a look at it from that standpoint. But as we have proven through the first 11 weeks, what we're doing is working. So again, it's something we will look at on a daily basis. And then again, unless we receive some type of guidance from the university that says we would need to shut down, we would obviously have to comply with that. But I think overall things are going well. And like I said, we would have to identify something, and we meet daily. We're watching this daily. I can tell you half of every one of my days is dealing with observing and watching what's going on and that type of stuff, as well as Brian Willis and Jeremy Raisler. So again, hats off to our students. I think they're doing a good job. I think they're following the protocol. It's going to be interesting once the fall semester starts, but we're going to be very strong on that to say, hey, stay with it. But again, as I've said before, it's fluid. Every day is different. We'll have to evaluate on a day-to-day basis. And if we think we identify anything that's creating an unsafe environment for either our students or staff, we would definitely stop training at that point.
All right, thanks, Dick. Jeremy, this one's for you. For new students taking 102 or really any flight course, how do they ensure that they have a flight lab? Who would they contact? And you're mute.
Muted. Gal, dang it. Sorry about that. So on Ames Web, you'll be able to log in and see your flight lab. So I know this gets real confusing where we're using Ames Web for registration and then Campus Connection, but the flight labs are all purely Ames Web. So that's where you can locate that information.
And if they're a new student though and not familiar with Ames Web, who could they contact?
They could contact myself, and actually we're going to get an email out to the students with all the contact information for all the courses. So myself, and there's a whole team of assistant chiefs that are responsible for all the flight training courses.
Thanks, Jeremy. This next question I will give to Professor Daku. Would it be possible to do all classes online if you are uncomfortable being there in person?
I'm going to answer part of that question, then I'm going to hand a little bit of it off to Lewis Archer here. But in general, we have offerings, online offerings for both flight courses, aviation courses, atmospheric sciences courses, and then there's courses across campus as well. If you're uncomfortable in class, in most cases, your class is going to be hybrid anyway within the aviation department, and so you will have an online option. I would just make that something that you talk to the professor of the course and say, I'm not comfortable coming to class. Can I engage in the online discussion? When it comes to flight courses, I think we have, certainly an option. We have to make sure that that's available for the flight course. But I think, like Lewis mentioned earlier on, that would be a discussion you would have with your professor immediately, so that we can accommodate and make sure that, that we can best teach you and handle that scenario. Lewis, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, that's, yep. From a flight course perspective, we will have that capability in all of the classes. But again, that's something that needs to be coordinated with the academic instructor for that particular course.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in and say the same thing. Just be sure to check with the professors for each course. We are trying to make that available for most of our courses, but for instance, if it's a lab, we're still working out details. So you just need to contact your professors.
All right, thanks. Jeremy, will there be an attempt made to keep existing CFI student pairings through the fall semester to further limit contact?
Easy way to answer that question is it depends. Not all courses work together. I mean, so as a student going from 323 to 325, the student needs to be with an MEI. That obviously isn't going to work. Same thing with 414. So there's some FAA certification requirements that we have to make sure that we're abiding by. So it's another yes and no type answer.
Thanks, Jeremy. Professor Archer, a question for you. Will flight students be allowed to conduct flight lessons for a subsequent flight course if the previous course is not finished? For example, doing lesson 1 for 222 while still needing to finish stage 24 in 221.
So flight training has to occur in sequence, and unfortunately that's not going to be an option. You'll have to be complete with the prerequisite flight training. So you'd have to be complete with 221 through the stage check before you can proceed into the 222 flight lab.
Hi, thanks. Question asks or states that it sounds like faculty are prepared on where to go on campus and when, but how will we support new students on campus? And I know I did kind of show that confusing slide at the Odegaard Hall, so I'll kind of answer this one. So new students, when you come to campus, welcome weekend, move in. The weekend before classes start, they are going to be offering a whole lot of campus tours at that time in small groups safely to integrate you into campus. So that's a great way to go around, see where your classes are held, see how the buildings are laid out and how the markings look. And then, of course, when it comes to the actual classes on whether or not you'll be in person or you'll be in Zoom, you'll get that information out from each of your individual faculty members at the start of the semester. So again, a lot more communication is going to be coming out both via email as well as through the class Blackboard site that you can log into on that same UND main page login site. And all of your classes will show up on your control center in there.
Thank you, Beth. Another question for you, Louis. I am enrolled in Aviation 102 as an incoming student this coming fall semester. What do I need to do in Ames in terms of reserving my course and slot if I am not already enrolled?
So for our incoming 102 students, that process is slightly different, and we've taken care of most of the details for you. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to myself or to our student services team. But an incoming new 102 student, an incoming freshman, there's no requirement to really do much of anything in Ames at this particular time.
So Jeremy or Dick, if flight operations close, will students be able to continue their flight training at a local airport?
No, unfortunately, the Part 141 pilot training requires that the flight training be done at the home school. So, and that applies for all courses. I know we had some deviations that related to private pilot, but that was strictly because that's the very first course of training, but the rest must be done at the home base.
Thanks, Jeremy. We'll stick with you for this one too. Will there be a requirement to quarantine prior to starting flight training, or will students be able to directly start their flight training upon returning?
Good question. Right now, the requirement is that if you traveled internationally, or if you traveled into North Dakota via public transportation, meaning Amtrak or airline, then yes, you are required to go through a 14-day quarantine. If you're arriving into Grand Forks just by your own car, then no, you are not.
Looks like another flight ops question, Jeremy. So if they're enrolled in 414 ground school for the fall, but finish 325 in September, when will they be assigned to CFI to start flight training for 414 or any prereq to new course?
Yeah, this is what I mean by the challenging semester where flight training is just going to be all over the board. So we're going to have students finishing 2 weeks in, 2 months in. It's going to be all over the place. So once a student finishes their previous course, they will still need to register for a flight lab, or we'll help them through that process, and then we'll get them with the CFI. But we're not, excuse me, we're not going to assign a flight instructor for somebody that's still, for a future course, for somebody that still has weeks or months of flight training remaining.
I guess this is the Jeremy show this evening. So got another one for you, Jeremy. Recently, an airworthiness directive was issued for Aspen flight displays, limiting operations to day VFR only. Will this AD affect flight operations, or is this not applicable to our aircraft?
Yeah, I saw that question. I'll be honest, I'm Googling it right now. I haven't heard anything. Our maintenance department is phenomenal. And if it did affect us, I'm pretty sure we would have been alerted to this already. But this is the first I've heard of it.
I did hear on that there was a much more limited group of aircraft that were going to be impacted. So I suspect it's not our airplanes.
I'll answer a quick question, then I'll relay one over to Dick. So one question is, will the Zoom be taped and available later? Yes, it will be taped. We'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel and sending that link out to all of you. So if someone did miss it, we will be getting that information out to you. And then Dick, is it possible to schedule your ramp badge or TSA before school starts if you are in the area?
I'm hoping so, yes. We're still right now getting our individual at the airport is getting fully checked out in that whole Starfish program. Once we get that done, I'm hoping, I don't want to give it in the near future, I'm going to say you will hear some information that will allow you to go ahead and schedule that so you can get that taken care of. So we are going to try to do that because we're doing everything we can to try to limit everybody showing up here the first couple days of school. So I will follow up on that too. If whoever is asking that question, feel free to email me and I can check with them to see what they're doing as of tomorrow or so forth, if they're taking those types of things. So.
Okay, I think this question would probably still be best for Jeremy. It could be a Lewis Archer question though, so one of you guys. If a new student taking Aviation 102 has a lab time, how do we know where to go and what to do for the first time?
That's another good question. So when you are assigned a flight instructor days before the semester begins, you should be getting the contact information for that flight instructor. Plus, in Ames Web, make sure that your own personal contact information is updated with email and phone, because your assigned flight instructor will have access to that contact info and will be calling you before the semester begins. So important thing is establishing contact information and then contacting the flight instructor from there.
Thanks, Jeremy. Gretchen, this one's for you. The student just wants to make sure that Atmospheric Science 210 labs are in person but split into 2 different rooms.
That's correct. So I think on Campus Connection, you're just going to see 1 room listed, but we do have 2 rooms reserved. So you can just show up at your regular time and we will get everybody split between 2 classrooms.
Thank you, Gretchen. Shane, this is a question for you. What is the procedure to get into Avit 480 in the fall if we're finished with Avit 415 ground school class, but not the flight lab?
Okay, good question. Stay tuned for an answer on this one because we're working on the details of that. One of the challenges with 480, just to give you a kind of a perspective here, is that we have very limited capacity. Traditionally, pre-COVID days, we have very limited capacity just because we have 1 flight training device and a limited number of instructors who can teach in the FTD itself. So that limits our time frame. It limits the number of people we can handle at a given time. So that's kind of the reason why we run a little bit differently in that course than other flight courses. With that being said, we want to definitely be able to manage our enrollments. And at this time, we're looking at where we're at, who's enrolled, how much space we're going to have available, and we're going to make a decision here in the next week or so as to what the cutoff point will be for people that are in 415 and not done their flight training. Hopefully within the next week, you'll see more information. I will be emailing through the 415 ground schools, and anybody that has questions on this can either email Lewis or myself, and we can give you the most up-to-date answer on that.
Thanks, Shane. So Dick, any idea when we'll be able to take public transportation without quarantine?
I'll be totally honest, I have no idea. With the current situation in the country, with cases going up, I would say it's going to be quite a while before you'll see that change.
Okay, the next question, I'll take a stab at it, and Beth, you may want to chime in too. What would have to happen for classes to be fully online this semester? Well, that's a great question, and that's something that's totally out of our control. I mean, that's a decision that would be made by the university, and the university consults with the health department and the president's cabinet, and they monitor these things on an ongoing basis. And that's a decision that would be made at a much higher level than we can make here in the aviation department or in the Odegaard school. So Beth, do you have anything additional to add on that?
I was just going to see if Paul maybe did. I know a lot of meetings happening at the executive level on campus this summer. So Paul?
No, you answered it well, Brett. And the president in his Zooms last week basically said it all depends on what's going on, and there's no definitive event that's going to take place that triggers a movement to all online classes. So it's a fluid situation, and as was mentioned before, flexibility is key.
I guess the only thing I will add is I know as a faculty, as a college, we are definitely much more prepared for that if it were to happen than we were, say, in March of this year. I know I've often said I didn't realize just how far behind on technology I was until March 15th happened, and I had to learn a whole lot of things very quickly, and as faculty and staff, we adapted very well. So if that did happen again, I think you're going to see a much different outcome than perhaps you saw in mid-March when it happened almost out of the blue for most of us. But hopefully, again, we're excited to see you back on campus, and so we're preparing and looking forward to a few weeks from now. Let's see, I've got a question for Lewis. If students are on a wait list for a flight course, when do they anticipate that wait list will be cleared?
Yep, so that's a great question. I've been monitoring the demand for our flight courses every day. And we have seen in some classes where we've had a lot of demand on the wait list, we've been able to create new sections. So we've done that for 221 and 415 and a couple of other courses as well to accommodate as much of that demand as possible. So there are still some seats available in a few of our flight courses with those new sections. However, we are, of course, limited to the COVID capacity in each of our classrooms. So if the classroom capacity is reached, then we can't simply clear the wait list because we won't have the ability to put that student in the classroom. Now we are going to explore other potential options, whether we have enough demand to justify additional sections, we would certainly explore that, or other options where we could perhaps accommodate some waitlist students in a different format. That's something we'll explore as well. So we're continuing to monitor that.
Thank you, Lewis. This question's for Jeremy. For those of us finishing up a summer flight course, when we do finish the flight training in the fall, what happens if the permanent flight lab times do not work with our schedule?
Yeah, we'll take those on a case-by-case basis. So if flight labs remaining or flight labs available don't work in your schedule, it's literally going to be case-by-case. So don't worry about it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Brett, I'll let you take this one. So on the 309 EZ side, it says that you can't travel outside of North Dakota. Is that correct screening, or should it be outside of the state as long as you don't use public transportation?
I think the last part of that is correct. What's likely happened there is that's probably the old information from 309 when that was initially the policy. That's now been updated, I think, just to limit it to public transportation. So I would look at the information that comes out for the fall and follow what's posted then. Okay, and my question is, I'm not sure really who to direct this to. I guess maybe Paul, you might know something about this. I think Gary looked into it a little bit and found out that things were filtered on campus as far as airflow. The question is, are there considerations in place regarding the new emphasis on the importance of ventilation in indoor spaces? I know Gary looked into that with respect to our buildings on campus, and we were good there. So you might have more information there, Paul.
Yeah, no, that is correct, Brett. The Odegaard School complex was fine. I'm not sure if they got results at the airport, Dick or Jeremy, on the ventilation out there, but they're looking at areas that may need some increased filtration applied to them, and I know they're working the problem as we go forward and ensuring every building on campus is at a safe level as we move into the fall semester. So I think the bottom line is that the university is well aware of those possible situations of contamination and thoroughly investigated each building and making sure it's safe for the students.
Thanks, Paul. So Jeremy, do you have a certain number of CFIs that you plan to be hired in the future? What's your ideal number?
Right now, we're still screening based upon quality. So we want to get to a point where the flight schedule is comfortable for the students. Let's put it that way, where it allows for a lot of flexibility. And in all honesty, we're not overworking CFIs. So we're going to keep hiring. And I know there's rumors out there already that we're not going to hire in December, and that's completely false. But we are going to actively hire again in December in preparation for the spring semester.
Thank you, Jeremy. Dick, I think we'll give this one to you. For new students, if we own a car and wish to drive and park at the airport during our flight labs, is there a parking permit for the airport or a certain parking lot for students?
Yeah, you need to check with parking on it. I did see a question go through on email with that the other day. And I don't quote me, but if I remember right on the email, they said for parking at the airport, they can get a permit that's like $50 for the year of the semester. I'm not sure, but there was that question, and parking did answer that on email to this individual. So you can get a permit for parking out at the airport, and it's not that expensive.
Otherwise, if you do live on campus and have a parking permit, it would work both at the airport and on campus. So you don't need to buy 2 permits if you're already living on campus or have an off-campus permit. Let's see, Jeremy, how many students will be returning to the flight schedule in the fall that are not currently flying right now?
Well, when we started the semester in January, we had 1,400 students on the flight schedule. So now some of the students, some of our contract students, our Japanese Tokai students are back in Japan. So in the neighborhood of probably around 300 students have not resumed flight training since the COVID shutdown. So, and you know, that's normal for this time of year. We're very used to having lower enrollment in the summer, and then fall is back to our full enrollment. So this is a very normal pattern for us.
Thanks, Jeremy. Lewis, this question's for you. For pre-aviation students this fall, will there be info provided later if they're able to get worked in to start flying in the spring semester? And if so, who will contact the student with instructions?
Yeah, so if the student is eligible to take 102 in the spring, then they would be able to sign up for that course when spring registration opens, which won't be for a few months from now. So I would say stay tuned, and once we approach the spring semester, we'll have tons of information distributed about how to sign up for 102 and all the other flight courses.
Thanks, Louis. 2 questions for you, Jeremy, that are kind of combined. Is there going to be preferred hiring still in place for CFIs, and will the December hiring take place over Zoom? I'm not sure if you've thought that far ahead to December yet.
No, I haven't thought that. Well, preferred hiring we have. So preferred hiring is, yes, still available in December. We are evaluating the future of preferred hiring for 2021, but it is available for this December. And if the hiring is done over Zoom or not, we did do that this past July. That will be based upon how we currently stand at that time. So too early to tell on that.
Thank you, Jeremy. Dick, I have a question for you, and then I think we maybe have one more or so. Another car question, Dick. With limited shuttles now, only 4 students per shuttle, are you recommending new students bring their own car?
I would advise that if they do have access to one, you know, and it's very dependent upon their schedule, that they probably do. And I did find that email for that other question too, and it said from parking, it said, you can purchase a $50 HOAPT permit that allows you to park in the ASH overflow areas out at the airport along with an apartment lot, is what it states. So there is a permit for that. Where that all, I'm not quite sure what the overflow area specifically is, but they can get a $50 permit for parking out here. So, but back to the first question you just asked, Brett, yeah, I guess my advice is it might not be a bad idea. They could start with the car, and then if it appears as if the shuttle's working for them, they could always take it home. You know, I just don't know the answer to that, because we kind of have to see how the semester rolls out, and it's better to be safe to have that transportation if needed.
All right, Jeremy, what can you tell us about the MEI program at UND and the future of that?
Sure, yeah. So I believe what this individual is asking about is we did offer free MEI training because the school needs MEIs, and the MEI was not really required to move on in the industry. Well, when the industry does change, when things tighten up, the MEI becomes the differentiating factor in some pilot hiring. So the MEI program is popular again. So we have plenty of people signed up wanting to be an MEI. The free MEI program is on hold. It's a supply and demand factor. And I don't see it returning anytime soon just because with the industry slowdown, getting an MEI, employees get it at a reduced rate. So there's still a benefit out there. But the free MEI is no longer available.
Okay, thank you. So I guess another question just popped up, but we are coming close to our ending time. I can answer these two questions pretty quickly. So question is, Wings Cafe going to be open this semester? And yes, it is planning to be open this fall semester, along with some other locations across campus. They're trying to limit the involvement in the different food centers across campus, so they're finding more outposts. So Wings Cafe is definitely one of those areas. There is not going to be any of the hot food options at Wings Cafe. There's going to be more of the cold food take and go type options. But the seating and everything is in place up there with, of course, the physical distancing in place. So Wings Cafe, as well as stay tuned, there's going to be other locations throughout campus as well to ensure that there are places to get food. You just may not be all congregating at Wilkerson or the Squires Dining Hall. And then the last question that we have is about air traffic students. Do they need to create an Ames account before school starts, or can you wait? You can definitely wait. A lot of these questions that I know you have as new students coming into the program, we will be covering in the Aviation 100 class. I know Atmospheric Sciences also has Atmospheric Science 100 class, which are orientation courses to really help you answer all of these questions that you have during the first few weeks of school. So all new students that are listening, make sure that you're enrolled in one of those two courses. So looks like we answered about 39 questions. So great job, panel. And Paul, if you want to say a few words to wrap it up this evening.
You're muted, Paul.
Thank you very much, Beth. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks to each of the panelists for participating. Great information, and thanks to all the students for tuning in and getting this valuable information as we approach a semester like we've never had before in our 53-year history at the Odegaard School. We're all in this together. As I think it was Brett mentioned, flexibility is the key, and that is the key as we approach this semester for sure, because things can change the next day, and you just have to be flexible. But and my last comment is the same as I mentioned as in the welcome, as far as ensuring the safety of the entire university and the Odegaard School is making sure that we're complying with their COVID requirements so that we don't have an outbreak. And it's a 24/7 obligation on all of our parts, students, faculty, and staff, to ensure the safety of everybody. And so it's, again, just not when you're on campus, but throughout the weekends. You have to make good choices, even more so now than it has been in the past. It's going to be a challenge for us, but I think we've demonstrated that we can do that here this summer, thanks to great folks at the airport and throughout the entire university. So looking forward for the semester to start here in a couple weeks, and certainly get in touch with us if you have further questions before we all get started here on August 24th. Thank you very much, everybody.